David, and good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to see everybody. I hope that you have been having a really fantastic meeting thus far. I'm also joined by Robert Nobles, who is the vice chair of the faculty committee, and we will be sharing a couple of different presentations, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to do some engagement along the way. The focus for today is to get us thinking about the faculty workload survey, which is one of the primary activities of the faculty committee. The second thing that we added to the agenda, which we thought would be a useful conversation to have in this forum today, is a discussion about the Fdp evaluation. You may recall that Robert Nobles shared with us the plans for how to get started on evaluation, and there's an update in that there's been an evaluation plan submitted to the executive committee of the FDP, and we're considering how to move forward on identifying a potential evaluation team to help us. So that's what we have planned. Don't be shy. We're happy to have a conversation. And I think at this point, it would be great if we could see the slide deck.
Do you not see it, Michelle?
I now see the agenda. Yes, I didn't see it before. Okay, so the agenda is, as I said before, our workload survey discussion and evaluation discussion. And then if we have time for updates in the group, that would be great too. And David, before I go too much further, is there a way, how do you have the view? Right now I see a view of a single speaker. Is that something I can change? It is, okay.
Yes.
There we go. Okay, much better. I needed to set you all to a gallery view so that I could be less distracted. That's much better. Okay, next slide, please. So what I thought would be a good beginning place in talking about the faculty workload survey is just bringing us all on the same understanding of the survey. Some of you are new members of the institution. Some of you have been with us for a long time, but just for the benefit of everybody in the audience, I just want to remind everyone that we at the Federal Demonstration Partnership have a cycle of implementing what's called the faculty workload survey. It was initially called the faculty burden work survey in its first iteration. And the idea is to use this survey to learn what federally funded principal investigators at our member institutions are experiencing with respect to the implementation of their awards. The way that we have implemented this survey is to do it on a rotating basis. So we do it every 6 years. The first survey was implemented the report was written in 2006 for a survey that was implemented in 2005. The second survey was implemented in 2012, the third in 2018. So we are pushing right up against the time that we need to be organized in order to implement the fourth faculty workload survey in or about 2024. And that's one of the things we'll talk about today. And I hope you'll be thinking about what the timing looks like and whether that is the right timing to actually do the next implementation. The survey itself asks questions about investigators in terms of their own experience in the academy. So really trying to get a profile of investigators based on the types of grants that they do, the funding agencies, the stage of their career, their gender, their race and ethnicity, so that we can have a profile of the typical awardee. And then the investigators are asked questions about what comprises the time that they spent both on their research as well as on activities administrating their awards. So I'm sure many of you on this call have taken the survey, as I have, but for those of you who may not have taken the survey, what we do is we implement it across all of the institutions of the FDP. So all member institutions are participants in the survey. And within our member institutions, the federally funded investigators for the time period that's actually delegated as the survey window are the ones who answer the questions. We typically have a response rate of something in the 20% range. So of those people surveyed, we get about a 20% response, which is a pretty good response for a web survey, which is the format. And that's what we are in, what we want to discuss today is just sort of how do we ramp our way up to being ready to implement that survey. And the last thing I want to just mention about why it matters for the FDP is that because we have done this now in a sequence where we've done the first 3 surveys on a 6-year cycle, it gives us the opportunity to track whether we think that faculty burden has increased or decreased over the time period in question. I only gave you one highlight from the surveys, and that's the bottom line number. So in the 2005 survey, faculty reported a research administration burden of 42.3%, meaning 42.3% of their time was spent on activities to administrate their awards rather than on the research itself. In 2012, it was the same number. And in the last iteration of the survey, it actually increased to 44.3%. And what's significant about that, of course, is that we at the FDP are all about trying to reduce or prevent workload from going up, the burden for administrating grants from going up. And in order to be able to sort of track how well we're doing on that, having this information from the survey about that actual experience that faculty have is a key data point, not only for our group as in the faculty committee, but also for the FDP as a whole. So before I go on, I just want to hit the pause and see if there are any comments or questions about just that sort of baseline, you know, what the survey is and why it matters for us. Well,
Yeah.
I'll invite you not to be shy. There was a comment, David, go ahead.
Yeah, this is David Pollock. I'm at UAB. And I'm curious about what the survey is considering administrative tasks. Is this writing the proposal or sending in reports?
Yes. So
Okay,
it's
yeah.
pre-award, post-award, proposal preparation, and compliance paperwork, basically.
Yes.
The part that is the research itself is defined as the activities that you're undertaking as a part of the
Sure.
actual funded award. So just so that we're all clear on that distinction.
Right, right.
David, you could go to the next slide.
But with that question, it also says that you haven't seen the full survey. So I think you sent out a link to it, Michelle, earlier today where people could see the actual questions that are posed. Is that right?
What I sent earlier today to the faculty, the people on the faculty listserv, I hope all of you received the message. But if you didn't, you should let me know in the chat so that we can add you to the listserv. I've sent actually something out to the listserv both yesterday and today, and I'm planning to do it tomorrow as well as Thursday, just letting people know what's on the agenda that might be of interest for the faculty. And it goes to who's ever on the faculty listserv, and that may or may not include the people on this call. So we're trying to sort that out as well. It's just a kind of constant issue that we face with FDP of communicating with the faculty. If you did not receive that email today, please put your email in the chat so that we can make sure that you're added to the list. But going back to what I did send out, I actually sent out to everybody that is on the list the last 3 reports. So I sent the report that Sarah Rockwell had published actually, and then the 2 reports that Sandy Schneider, who may be on the call, I'm not sure if she's joined us yet or not, who was the PI for the last 2 versions of the survey, so that you could have those in one place. And what the reports do, to Robert's point, is they explain in pretty strong detail what kinds of questions are asked, what we're considering as administrative burden, what we're considering to be the actual grant activities, and how all that shakes out at a high level in terms of the experiences that faculty report and the trend lines. What I'm not going to do today is go into the actual findings other than the high level finding. I feel that that's far better coming from Sandy Schneider than from me, and I'm sure she would be willing to share more about that at a future meeting if we want to refresh on what the last survey actually it just showed us underneath the hood of all of the data, because it was really a pretty good analysis that was done. And again, we can send those links out again to everybody. But I did want to talk a little bit about what the impacts of the survey are. And really just dealing with the idea that, you know, this survey is kind of a hallmark or a marquee program of the FDP. And certainly for the faculty committee, it's one of our primary activities that we engage on this 6-year cycle. We at the FDP use it to inform and prioritize FDP activities. And so when you think about demonstrations that are stood up, they're often stood up in direct relationship to the survey. So for instance, the IRB Wizard demonstration that we did a few years ago and that concluded, I guess, 2 years ago, was directly to try to deal with some of the administrative burden that's associated with our compliance programs. We often use the survey as a point of departure, or I will say like an impetus for moving in some areas of interest, such as the convening activities that we do, or a while ago, we had written a report on when trainees drop out of the pipeline, because there had been a whole connection between the survey and kind of this sort of movement of people into the field of science, into various fields of science as professionals, and what might be preventing them. And just this whole sort of tracking of both the combination of an increase in administrative workload, as well as later ages that people get their first role as a federal PI, all sort of putting a squeeze on the scientific workforce of the nation. Certainly diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, I think, are right at the top of people's thinking as well, in terms of some of the activities that we want to undertake and are asked to undertake with our federal partners. A second thing that the survey does is provide a data point that can inform some grant policy. So there's going to be a lot of attention at this particular meeting of the new Office of Science and Technology guidance that was just provided around research security, which will be the focus of a session on Thursday. But in that meeting, in that document, is just a lot of attention to the Federal Demonstration Partnership and its activities, and kind of the mandate to do all the things that they want to do while keeping administrative burden as low as possible. So I think those are just a couple of the ways in which, you know, we think there's a direct policy connection. It's also used by our home institutions to inform how we look at improving the grant cycle at our home institutions, as well as how we partner here at FDP. So the whole impetus, I think, for FACT, and I don't want to speak for the group because they have their own session coming up later on in the FDP meetings, but I think part of the idea there is that there's a component of administrative responsibility that is imposed by the federal government, but there's another component we think that is institutionally specific, and there's a responsibility for our faculty and administrative reps to make sure that they're in communication about the things that are happening at FDP, so that that can be socialized back at the home institution. We also, in the past 2 cycles, have been able to have institution-specific reports for those institutions that have enough responses that allow us to do that and have an anonymous reporting of the findings. And so some institutions, mine is an example of one that does, regularly uses that survey to track how well we're doing in some of the service provision that we do. And we can also look at how we compare against the figures as a whole, so that we know whether, for instance, if in my institution, IRB is seen as the issue that is accounting for most of the compliance burden, is that higher or lower than, you know, what was reported as a whole to the survey. So I think there are lots of ways in which it is helpful for us there. And then finally, something you may be a little bit less aware of, but which I spend a lot of time on myself because of some of the reporting that we do, in connection with our partnership with GWIR, the Government University Industry Research Roundtable of the National Academies, which is the convening organization for the FDP. I track the scholarship that comes out of the survey and have a running bibliography, if you will, of citations of the data that come out of the survey and how it weaves its way into the scholarly literature. So I think those are just some of the ways in which we have impacts. I'm always happy to hear more from the group if there's something you think that I've missed in that characterization. So again, let me hit the pause. And if you have comments or questions, feel free to jump in.
And I'm monitoring the chat. I did post the links to the surveys in the chat while you were chatting.
That's great. Thank you.
There's at least 10 people that want to be added to the listserv, so that will need to be captured. Maybe David or Sarah can capture it and add it, unless you manage the listserv yourself.
I don't.
I sent it to Michelle by email.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, that's great.
I had to add the late one, the Kate sent it late, but so you have 2 emails, but you'll have it.
I see some more. Yeah, so we have a federal demonstration partnership faculty list served, which I utilize around the meeting time to reach out. So please do let us know if you're not on the list. You should have received 2 messages this week. So, and I assume that's not hitting your junk mail, but you can always check and see. All right, David, I'm ready for the next slide. Thank you. So one of the things I wanted to do is to get a conversation started today about just some of the ways in which faculty can be involved in the survey process. In the past, we have had a work group for the faculty workload survey of many faculty and some administrators who help us think about things like the ones that are on this list. So one of them has to do with the design, scope, and focus of the survey. We do have a survey instrument that's been implemented. It was amended in the last cycle from the prior 2 cycles, and I'm sure we will update that instrument again. This past cycle in 2018, we enlisted the support of Sandy Schneider as the PI and the University of South Florida to implement the survey in connection with a group called Sound Rocket. We, as a part of this strategic plan for phase 7, have set aside funding to actually bring a survey research group on board to help us do the implementation. And we're hoping to continue to involve Sandy as a consultant to help make sure that the knowledge base that we have from the last implementation translates over into the next implementation of the survey. That said, there's still, I think, an important role for faculty to play in taking a look at the survey instrument and making sure that the questions are still current. If there are any new questions that we might want to add, if there's some new themes that we might want to pick out and include, if there's some things in the survey instrument that are no longer applicable, we might want to remove them. And we want to make sure that we're in tune with the times, as well as the deeper and broader array of members that we have as a part of the large membership growth. So that's one area that I think faculty can be thinking about being involved. A second way in which faculty are involved, I mentioned earlier, which is that all federal PIs for all FDP institutions are invited to participate in the survey and complete it. The way in which that happens is that we work with the research administrative staff of your universities to identify the list of PIs to whom we would then reach out to have them fill out the survey. So there's a whole process that goes on in that communication between the design of the survey and the implementation that involves the administrative reps. And so at the very least, as of today, it's just really important, again, that you're in the communication loop with your administrative reps so that you're tracking how they are in turn responding to the requests that come from the implementation process to coordinate across campuses and reach out to their faculty. So that's a second way in which faculty are involved. And for faculty reps, I think it's really important to be aware of that step, because there's a role that you can play in making sure, did your administrative rep get the information about the survey, and is the survey in fact being disseminated to the faculty on your campus. I think all the faculty reps can play a role in helping us to ensure that that happens. A third way that I think faculty can be involved in the survey as a larger project is through your scholarship. So we do have a fair amount of literature that's been published drawing from the data, and it's certainly the surveys themselves, or I should say the reports of the surveys, are frequently cited in the literature. I don't know how many of you have taken the time to look at that, but certainly if it's something of interest to you, I think it's important to know that there is a sort of community out there that is focused on the research experience, on the pipeline around the research experience, on the experiences that faculty say that they're having with respect to the administrative challenges that they might be facing, and that all factors in. Our survey reports tend to be a primary source that many people draw on for those discussions. A fourth way that faculty can be involved is to help translate some of the things that we learn about from the survey into practices at home institutions, sometimes working in partnership with your administrative rep, sometimes through your own advocacy through faculty networks, so that we get the word out about the outcomes of the survey and about how that is the central function for the FDP. And a fifth way that faculty can be involved is around this whole workforce continuity issue. I know when I first joined the FDP, it was a very big focus of this survey to connect the dots between the implementation of the survey, the number of people in the scientific workforce in the US, the challenges that trainees were facing to enter into the workforce, and the ways in which administrative responsibilities might be cutting against the sort of business practice that we all face in doing our work as researchers. So again, let me just hit the pause. And I also saw that, I think I saw Sandy Schneider in the space. So she's popping in and out there she is. Hello, Sandy. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm here, but it says I'm you. So I thought, well, that's a little weird. Maybe I'll.
That's because I shared my link. but Sandy is in fact Sandy Schneider, the actual author of 2 of the reports that are written in, that are linked to the chat here. And I'm glad that you could join us on short notice.
I'm the second Michelle. I'm Michelle wannabe.
It just shows that I cheated on the way, which is a bad example to be setting, I guess, for everybody on the access to the space here. Again, let me pause and see if anybody wants to add anything. Again, if I'm missing something in terms of the involvement of faculty, I'm happy to have additional things, but those are just some ideas that I wanted to share with you about why it matters for us. And especially for those of you who may be new to the conversation about the faculty workload survey, why it is such a central activity for the faculty committee.
Is Sandy sharing, or we're soliciting questions and thoughts?
Thoughts are, I always like to leave a pause for thoughts and comments, and sometimes it takes people a minute to think about what they might want to say. So I never want to just jump too quickly. So, but it's okay. We can move on to the next slide.
No. I'm just an extreme extrovert. So any pauses cause anxiety. So for anybody who's new, and for individuals that are old to FDP or seasoned, do you have any thoughts or comments related to the faculty workload survey and what has been presented? I see Robert Butera and Neil unmuting. So Robert, you first, and then Neil.
Yeah, I just have a quick comment. And I guess it's an endorsement. We found the institutional specific survey well worth paying for. the value of that survey goes up, the more people who respond to it, because an important part of it is, they try to lump you into peer groups. And these peer groups, in our experience, might be 5 or 6 other universities. The more that respond and have good responses, the more the people there are in your peer group to actually do that deep dive analysis. But we found it really valuable.
I'm really glad to hear that, because I know that Sandy works feverishly on those institutional reports. It takes a tremendous amount of time to get them out to all the institutions. So it is really good to know that they're very useful for you.
So the more who do it, the better it is for all of us.
I see John, doing the thumb raise. Yeah, the institutional report, we find them invaluable as well. And I think going to kind of the decision points we have ahead, which we won't go through all of those today. Today is really just to get us all sort of thinking about the workload survey and how we would want to be involved. But certainly a decision point that we have to make is whether we want to continue the institutional reports. And if we do, to make sure that we do so in a very intentional way in the scoping of the resubmission of the redo of the next version of the survey.
So a couple questions in the chat, but I called on Neil next, and then I'll do the chat questions. Neil?
Yeah, I just wanted to underline, sort of, I should probably put my camera back on. Just wanted to underline Robert's point as well about the importance of getting participation. But I really, really wanted to stress that each of us has a really important role to play as faculty. We've had cases in the past where staff representation has changed, and they're the ones who are the kind of primary contact on the survey. And some of them did not recognize that this was important to do or understand the potential benefit to the institution of trying to get a good turnout. And so I kind of had to intervene to make sure that we actually did send out notice to our faculty to fill out the survey, that type of thing, and that this was a worthwhile thing to purchase on the part of the Office of VP for Research and so on. So it's not as though we can stand by idly and let everybody else distribute the survey. We need to do the double checking and make sure that it's given its due weight at our own home institution.
Yeah, there really should be a letter from FDP that can be amplified at our home institutions and coordinate maybe with our institutional official, vice president for research, the faculty and administrative leads of FDP, promoting the survey of investigators so that we can improve locally and nationally. But hopefully through the process that will be done. Is someone saying something? All right.
Yeah,
So,
and Robert, just to that point, yes, as we hone in on a timeline for all of the things that have to happen between now and the actual implementation, those are among the things that need to be attended to by the implementation process. So we will eventually get to that conversation in which we do lay out that very structured phase, of what happens and when it happens. Today, I think it's really just about making everybody aware that we're at the very beginning point of the cycle of the implementation, and to just get a very broad, sort of understanding to our new members, as well as a reminder, that we have the survey there. And of course, anybody who wants to be involved in the working group around the implementation of the faculty workload survey, today will be our first of what we hope will be a few calls for engagement. So be thinking about if you want to be part of that working group.
okay, Michelle, to that point, because a couple of people have already private chatted me that they're interested, what
Great.
is the mechanism for them volunteering for the faculty workload working group?
The mechanism for volunteering can be sending a chat to Robert, emailing me. You could put your interest in the chat and we will keep track of all of it. I will also follow up with an email to the faculty listserv. So again, if you're not finding that you're getting those emails, make sure that we have your email so we can add you to the list.
So I suggest to the group, put it in the open chat or direct chat to Michelle so that she can keep the list. And I do need to put this disclaimer to the group. This working group really worked. So it's
It is a working group.
Yeah. So Sandy, maybe it would be helpful for you to talk through how you engage the working group historically as a model or a template of what might occur in the future. But just how did you engage when you were leading it and many of us were participating in the working group?
Well, this meeting is extremely timely, and I went back and I looked at my notes, and it turns out that one of our first real working groups started, I think, at the May meeting. And so what we did at the May meeting is we spent a lot of time thinking through what the previous items had been and working through how we might want to change up those items. More things you want to change, the more time it's going to take to really get it right. And so we worked both at the meetings and on the in-betweens to try and fashion the wording that we wanted, so that what we did is together we had kind of a general idea, then we went back, wordsmithed a little bit, brought back the wordsmithing to the following meeting, and continued that process for roughly a year. But based on the timing of the last survey, I think the launch for this survey, if I'm right, would be somewhere like February 2023 regarding 2022, which I think that's what you had said. So we're moving right along, because fall is when it has to be kind of implemented so that it can get ready to run. And just another, just by the way, we did send a message to the directors of sponsored research, to the admin rep, and to the VP for research, I'm pretty sure last time. And as Michelle said, she's exactly right. We had kind of this lockstep of what happened when.
Yeah, thank you. I think I had calculated implementation in February 2024, covering the 2022-23 academic year is the cycle. If I haven't got it wrong. But in any event, within the next 2 years, the survey has to get implemented. And
right. Well, actually,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Actually, I guess, so I was looking, it was May 2016, we were doing that, and the launch of the survey was spring 2018. So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I'm not sure if there's been other stuff happening already, but if we want to change anything up, it has to happen really, really pretty quick. So you got maybe 6 months.
Yeah,
that's fair. So Kristen is asking in the chat, are we planning to add questions addressing the impact of COVID on faculty research administration burden? And I mean, the easy answer is yes, that's very, very likely, but I'm sure the working group. So Michelle, do you want to address that?
I certainly think that we want to make sure we have continuity between the surveys so that we can compare across the elements that would be constant. But I believe that we've always had in the survey, and Sandy can speak to this better than me, the ability to factor in new things that have come along that wouldn't have been in place in the previous time period in which the survey was implemented. And certainly COVID is right there. Maybe foreign influence would be another area where there have been new and will be new disclosure requirements that get implemented before the next survey is actually put into place. So the answer is yes, but with the caveat that we have to actually design it as so that we have this consistency as well as and look into these additional issues.
Okay. There's another question in the chat that I answered, but maybe you could put some frameworks around it. What is the composition of the working group with faculty and administrator representatives? And how big is the working group? I'm ad-libbing a little. Is a desired target number of people to serve on this type of working group?
I think that it can be open. I don't think there's any particular reason why it could not include some non-faculty. There is, and we'll get to this in a moment, there is a parallel conversation going on about a potential administrative workload survey. And that is a project that may be undertaken in parallel with this, but I want to make sure we don't confuse what the purpose of this is. So I think it's important to understand the audience of this survey is faculty PIs who actually answer the questions on the survey as it currently stands. And so we want to make sure that the way in which we design the survey reflects and connects with what those experiences are. I also saw a question on federal funding, and the answer is a little bit complicated in that the Federal Demonstration Partnership does receive funding from a number of federal agencies, and that agency funding in turn is used to support the whole of the activities of the FDP, the survey being one of them. So in an indirect way, the answer to that is yes, there is federal funding involved in implementing the survey. But it's not like you get a grant from the feds to implement the survey. It's a blended funding model.
David, is that your question? Because I read it slightly.
No, that has nothing to do with my question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Say your
My
question.
question is, a couple of years ago, we were informed that we could not use federal funding to pay for the administration of our grants, that the grants had to pay for the time and effort on the research. If it is true that 44% of our time is spent on the administration and not on the research, then anyone who is funding 70% of their time and effort for their salary is violating the rules, because you have to be using money from the grant to pay for your administration. And I was wondering, what are the rules? Writing the grant, can that be covered? Do all the other associated things you've listed, IACUC, IRB, data management, et cetera, et cetera?
It's a really excellent question. It takes us down a little tricky issue around the administrative burden as well. So just on the administrative side, what I think you're referring to is that there's an F&A rate, a facilities and administration rate, that all of our universities that receive federal funding actually pay. And if I'm interpreting your question correctly, and I apologize for not focusing on this the right way previously, the question is faculty time and effort that is administratively oriented factored into the F&A rate? What I can say about that from my own experience as the VP for research at my institution is definitively no, faculty time is not part of the F&A rate calculation at my institution. The only administrative costs that are factored into the F&A are the administrative costs of research administrators that support the faculty research effort. Faculty administrative effort on grants is above and beyond the actual administrative costs in the F&A rate, to my understanding. If somebody sees it differently, please jump in.
Well, that's not really my question either. So let's say, for example, you're a faculty member and have two grants for 35% each of your time and effort, for 70% of your time and effort covered by the government. If 44% of your time on top of that has to be spent administering it, then you are over 100%, and therefore you're committing fraud.
Yeah, so no.
That's my question.
Yeah. So I'll answer. So with the 235% that add up to 70% of your time paid for the federal government, anything you do on those projects it decreases from the active time you're facilitating your research. But the administrative burden that comes with facilitating your research is also covered by the government. So it's not in addition of, it's the additional things that are incorporated in that 35% that you may or may not have fully budgeted when you ask for 35% on that one project.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Any other conversation related to this? Is exciting.
I know, I see some other, yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add one little comment. There was a question about whether administrative reps might be on this working group. And it is true that the questions are all about faculty, but we had some very, very helpful people from the administrative reps helping us gear the questions in a way that they could then find them actionable with respect to helping faculty later. So for instance, keeping an archive of your research, the research data management piece, that was largely administrative reps. Melissa Korf comes to mind helping us with that and other things. And we also had some federal agency reps helping us here and there with various things. So yeah, I think everybody potentially could have a role so long as they stay focused on what the goal of the survey is.
Yeah, and then we'll just have to figure out, Michelle, you're leading this working group, right? Or is someone else?
I think we're gonna elicit participation in the working group,
Okay.
and then we'll figure it out from there.
Okay, all right.
I don't need to be the one that leads the working group, but I certainly want to know what's going on in the working group.
And I think before, the size of the working group was less than 20 individuals or so. I think
Yeah.
there was a rough range of 20-ish. Is that right, Sandy?
Well, so it was I would say a fluid group. That what would happen is we had, I would say, maybe 8 to 12 who were there at every turn. And then we had lots of folks that would sort of drop in or help us with a particular thing or be there at the meetings, but not as much on the in-betweens, et cetera. So the sort of hardcore group was somewhere around what you're suggesting, somewhere around a dozen maybe.
Okay, excellent.
We're all hardcore, but whatever, you know.
So I think we addressed the COVID question. We certainly think that's going to be something that'll be reflected along with anything else that's new that's happened since the last survey. Broadly on our to-do list is we have to assess kind of the implementation in light of COVID, meaning, do we want to stay on schedule with the 6-year interval? Do we think we need more time? Is there a consequence of adding more time, or is it just really, it's just something we have to think about carefully as a part of what comes next so that we can then develop a phased in plan. But until we kind of get straight on when we're going to implement, we can't back our way to that implementation date with all the steps in between. So that to me is the most urgent thing that we need to do, is sort of set the timing. Certainly, we intend to convene a working group, and this will be one of the things that we ask the working group to contemplate first. When do we want to be ready, and how do we want to move our way to that implementation date? What will be different this time around is that we have set money aside in the budget, and this is a part of our overall strategic planning effort during our phase 7 strategic plan, to do an RFP for survey groups to bid to implement the survey. And so we do need to have a very clear scope of work for that bid that is put together. And that'll be something that we work with the working group to do as well, to make sure that we incorporate all of the things that we need the survey team that we work with to do for us so that we can get it all done at once. So for instance, if we're going to do institutional reports, it needs to be part of the bidding process for the organizations that may choose to try to do for us to procure to do the survey. And then we also want to make sure that we're coordinating across other activities that may be going on at the FDP with respect to the survey. So so those are the things kind of top of list. I don't know if there are other comments before we move on. I don't know if we have one more slide related to the workload survey. Can we look ahead to see the next slide, or are we that? Yeah, so this is the last thing I want to kind of let people know, that there's some crossover activities that are happening related to the survey. So we're going to jump into evaluation here in just a moment. But one of the things that is baked into the Strategic 7 planning process is to have an FDP-wide evaluation. The survey is actually one of the quantitative evaluation measures that we have already identified as part of that evaluation process. We've also kind of baked the survey and the dissemination of survey results into the communication strategy for the FDP. We are talking about the possibility of an administrative workload survey. And I think the question there for us to be contemplating is, do we want to stand these up at the same time? Is there, what's the crosswalk between them? How do we want to align the questioning that would go in one survey with the things that we want to learn about in the other survey? And then finally, we have faculty committee. Of course, all of you are part of the faculty committee. We have our own priorities related to the survey, the most important of which is the reporting of the survey, the scholarship associated with the use of the survey, the way in which the survey is used to support policy. And we want to get into kind of the use and stewardship issue of the data itself, which previously we haven't really thought about whether we want to release a data package associated with the survey that would allow other people to evaluate some of the data on its own terms. And that's something I would like us to think about before we do the RFP for a firm to implement the survey. A second faculty priority are the tools that we develop at the FDP to reduce burden, like the IRB wizard or other kinds of demonstrations that might result in something that would be beneficial for faculty. And then finally, again, I want to stress this, strengthening the pipeline of researchers in the workforce, which is something that is an ancillary benefit to the survey. If you're trying to figure out how do you keep the workforce robust, understanding the way in which faculty time is used on federal research is a really important component of that particular equation. So those are the comments I wanted to share to get started. I think our action step is going to be to make sure that if you're interested in being a part of the working group, you let us know so that we can begin the planning process through the working group. And of course, we will keep the faculty space here updated on the progress as we move forward. All of that is made more awkward and challenging by the fact that we're virtual instead of in person. And we won't be back to an in-person meeting until the fall of 2022, as we announced at the beginning of the meeting. But our hope would be to be able to plan for bringing together this working group in that fall meeting to do some of the work that they would need to do in person to finalize some of the elements that we want to see in the next survey instrument. So those are my comments on this. Are there other questions or comments that you'd like to share before we move on to a discussion of evaluation?
Okay.
It's awfully quiet out there, so that's my cue to turn it over to you, Robert. You're next.
Silence is golden, and it stresses me out.
Let's go to the next slide. Next slide. There you go.
All right. So what I wanted to do with this group is provide an update related to where we are with the program evaluation, the evaluation, the comprehensive evaluation of FDP. Next slide. Kind of walk you through this. We've had a series of meetings, and I did a broad solicitation related to membership on this committee, and you can see the individuals that I've been engaging with related to developing an evaluation plan. So kudos and appreciation to the evaluation working group who had really gave valuable information to get us to where we are today. I took that plan and I shared it with the executive committee and gave a presentation to them. And I'll talk about that just a little bit towards the end when we get to next steps. But with this plan, and just to give you the meat of it, next slide, is this component that, oh, who's doing the slide? Okay, thank you. Is this component that we have an internal working group. We have a working group within FDP that will become a new working group to annually collect information from membership, right? And this information is really about satisfaction and outcomes. We need to gather information from membership on how well your service, your perceptions of your service, and how your service is being used to facilitate FDP's mission and your mission back home at your own home organizations. We also need to engage directly with operational and programmatic committees of understanding and making transparent their goals that they have annually, and then conducting measurement on if they have reached their goals. One of the things that get lost, I think, when we think about FDP is being a large organization, is that the flow of information of knowing what each of the groups have as priorities and their progress to making those priorities has not been disseminated as fluidly as we would desire. And so part of the evaluation process on an annual basis would have an annual report related to where we are as an organization on satisfaction outcomes and productivity of our groups that we've convened. Part of that is how many demonstrations we've been able to carry out or have planned, membership, et cetera, the data that we're talking about in terms of participation, caucusing, et cetera. And then there's this other component related to external evaluation. And this is the ask on the table to this group, is that through the process of planning FDP's evaluation, it became necessary to engage an outside evaluation center. And I think many of your institutions have evaluation centers, and you could say if you like them or not. So what I would say is, if you think you have a really good evaluation center that can partner with us on the external evaluation that would be carried out really 2 times during each phase. So, mid-cycle, which is 3 years into a phase, and then at the end of the phase to say how well we've done in a phase, and receive some a contract or compensation for that. Then the next step is, over the next month to 6 weeks, begin interviewing and engaging with these evaluation centers, work out a proposal process, select one, and become a partner with one of the membership evaluation centers based on your institutions. And so what will they do? There's going to be some critical questions that are necessary from an evaluation center. One, they'll review our annual data collection tools of the group. And we will give them those answers whenever they compile everything for the 3-year and end of phase reports. But the critical questions that we would ask is really looking at the existing resources of FDP and making sure that they're allocated effectively. And that's really engaging with our finance committee and then surveying you all related to activity of FDP. Documenting the level of success in accomplishing FDP's vision. So there's a lot of information related to the vision. Demonstrating that accountability requirements to stakeholders are fulfilled, and that is, just give you one of them, it is that each partnering institution should have a faculty representative, a technical representative, an administrative representative that is actively engaged in FDP, which was the promise when FDP member organizations signed up to be part of FDP. And so we would be assessing the level of engagement of the institutions and the individuals that are named into those roles within FDP. That's an example of that fulfillment. Aggregating information from the programmatic and operational committees to estimate the overall outcomes of FDP. So we'll find goals, we'll roll those goals up into accomplishments and then share them with the external group so that they can have a massive understanding of the successes of all of the members of FDP in our respective groupings. Create a report that incorporates the successes and disseminate that broadly, including back to our institutions. Next slide. And so with this external evaluation and with our internal evaluation, we would, I think, have a body of qualitative and quantitative information. And I didn't go through the micro elements of the report, but suffice it to say that the report will receive some additional feedback from the executive committee so that we can finalize it. And I will quit calling it draft with the working group. We then will begin drafting out the annual surveys to membership and the data collection forms that will be provided to the programmatic and operational committees to provide their goals. We will seek nominations and identify this external evaluation center affiliated with one of your institutions. And so I'll send out an email in February if I don't have, through this soft engagement with you all, sufficient resources, but I will publicize it broadly. We will look at the websites of the evaluation center, see the type of work they do, get some examples, and down select. And then after that point, we will be sharing what the survey will be. We'll share the evaluation plan created by the center, and began engaging the full caucus of FDP related to what's going on in evaluation. So that's where we are, and that is the plan. I am more than happy to share the evaluation plan, the current draft, with any of you, if desired. We're really ready to move forward in something that's necessary for FDP going forward as well. So I'll stop there because I didn't want to take up too much time talking about evaluation. I've shared over the course of the last year or so a few updates related to the committee. And so I'll stop there, answer your questions, see if the alignment makes sense, and then we'll get committee updates from our faculty liaisons in each of the respective groups.
Yeah, just on the evaluation plan, I was gonna, emphasize that that's been submitted to the executive committee of the FDP for action. The action step would be to then solicit an evaluation team from one of our member institutions to actually implement the evaluation. And I think it's important. I think Robert has already emphasized this, but I'll say it again for anybody who's knowledgeable about evaluation. Some of the data collection that we already do is and would be data that an evaluation team would look at. But in addition to that, they may develop new tools to gather additional information and insights about our effectiveness as an organization once they've had a chance to assess what we already have available to us. So where we already have feedback surveys that are being done, of course, that would be useful. We don't need to reinvent those. But the question is, how does that get then brought over into answering the question of how well we do what we say we're going to do, the way we say we're going to do it, and what's the impact of our activities? That's what we would put to an evaluation firm.
Yeah, so questions or thoughts from anyone on this late Tuesday evening without alcohol, which we typically have on late Tuesday evenings when we're together. Anything from anyone? Let me just ask a general question, and you could post your answer in the chat. Do any of you have great evaluation centers affiliated with your university that you just adore and think that they would be a great partner for FDP? If you do, just throw it in the chat just so I can get have some quick information that there are groups out there like this. And then Michelle, George, were you going to say anything? No. Okay. So I'll turn it over to you so that we can get committee updates from our liaisons of each of the respective groups. Then.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the update. So I believe we'll do a version of that update. Sorry, we don't need the slides anymore. Thank you. On Thursday, when we have our session that does all the updates for the various committee reports. So I want to leave the balance of the time for any updates that we have as you, just to remind everybody, and again, particularly for those of you who may be new to the faculty committee, the faculty forum and faculty committee, this meeting is a meeting of the whole of the faculty. And we have faculty who serve as co-chairs or liaisons to a number of activities around the FDP. We typically use our forum time, now that we're in our Zoom space, as a combination of our forum to discuss projects of interest or bring forward guest speakers, but we also use it as a small business meeting for any activities that people are involved in around the FDP. So for those of you who are involved in playing the role of being a liaison or a co-chair, now would be the time if you have an update to share on the activities you're involved in. I will open the floor to those updates. We've already heard from Robert, who's doing the evaluation working group. Do you have anything on your other committees, Robert? We're in the process of doing a transition around the infrastructure co-chair. Robert was the co-chair of the infrastructure committee. Jason Carter is the incoming co-chair of the infrastructure committee. So that is a change that has very recently been put into effect. Did you want to say more about that, Robert?
Yeah, so that was transitioned over to Jason Carter, my colleague in Montana State, Vice President for Research there, to co-chair with Lynette Arias for that role. So there's a number of activities going on. I don't want to really report on it because I haven't been participating. Lynette is here if you want her to give an update, but on behalf of Jason, I don't want to speak for the team.
I think he was just named, so I don't know. Has there been any activity since that happened, Lynette?
I'm just getting him up to speed.
Yeah, okay.
So maybe definitely next time you guys have a meeting, he should be able to report out.
Perfect.
If there ends up being time, I'm happy to provide a little update.
Sure. I mean,
But
we
why
have
don't
time.
you
We have a half an hour before this time period is over.
do? Well, I would say the two main things that infrastructure is working on right now are we have an internal systems working group. Oh, I suppose I could turn my camera on. Hello. We have formed over the last year what we're calling an internal systems working group. So for our operations at FDP and also for some of our demonstrations, we've ended up creating systems or databases, data sets. And so David Wright has built these in the past, and we've just kind of done them piecemeal, separate. This group is taking on bringing them together, updating our technology stack and approach, bringing in new developers, and creating interconnected modules for the operation of FDP. And putting together a team that can support if we need system development for a demonstration or something going forward. So that has been doing a lot of work. Examples of systems that you all might be familiar with are CUSP, something like the IRB wizard in the future. But pulling this all together will enable us to have more reporting power. There will be connections and remove redundancies and all kinds of benefits. So that's one of the things. And the other one is for all the work that everyone in FDP is doing, working groups, subcommittees, committees, we have been building a set of tools to just support those activities, project management tools, how to run meetings, just a whole host of things. So we have a working group that is completely focused on that and developing onboarding training. So once a new working group co-chairs get put into place, they will have a place to go to get them set up and using the same tools that we use throughout FTP. So that is a Reader's Digest version of the two main things.
Thank you.
Happy to take questions. George has a question.
You're on mute.
I think he was just resting his arm while he was working.
Oh, okay.
Giving the blood back.
Okay. Okay. Other activities going on. I don't know. I thought I saw that Jerry Cohen was here. And I can certainly talk a little bit about the federal, the Foreign Influence Working Group.
Is John working with the federal engagement, or was that Jerry?
Jerry is working on JAD and ERA.
Yeah, I can talk briefly about JAD if Jerry's gone.
Yeah,
That's a committee. It's Neil.
Neil, sorry. Go ahead, Neil.
I'm prohibited from turning on my video for some reason.
Oh, no.
The host stopped it.
What? Well, there, I've allowed there, please restart it.
There we go.
What
Okay.
happened there?
All right, so for those, again, newer members, JAD is there to provide advice to grants.gov. And in particular, we try to have some, although it's overwhelmingly not faculty representatives. Jerry was carrying the water for us for many years before he kind of jawboned me into joining him on that particular committee. We meet about once a month to discuss mainly grants.gov types of issues, in particular how their system's organized and how they can be capturing the sorts of things that faculty would like them to capture, like automatically, as opposed to us having to fill in all the forms ourselves, that type of thing. It's changed its leadership recently, and it hasn't met as often as it has in the past, but it's still a very active group. And I just want to encourage people to consider the possibility of joining that, particularly if you've got some technical expertise with respect to issues around grant application processes.
Which I think is going to be a really big feature of all of the changes that may be coming as a result of the new OSTP guidance on research security.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, we're already seeing some things in terms of two-factor authentication being brought in, and universal login in government, and so on, login.gov. So these are all things that affect our lives, because if we're going to interact with granting agencies. And this particular group is a place where we, as faculty, can have some degree of influence. So again, consider the possibility of joining the group as we look for new members. And if you have issues, bring it to Jerry or to myself, because we'll be in there representing you.
Lynette?
I have a question, Neil. In the JAD, do you guys talk about the QSMO, the grants QSMO at all? Has that come up?
I don't think that one is that. I don't think that issue sort of has come up. Yeah.
So it might be a good group to bring to that group or faculty in general. It stands for Quality Service Management Organization. And the things they do, for instance, they're pushing all the agency systems to go to login.gov.
Right.
That's part of why you're seeing an increase. And they're building a marketplace for all the systems. So if an agency needs a system or wants to build a new system, they have to go to the QSMO and first look at what's in the marketplace before they go creating another system, things like that. They're a super, super awesome team. They're very, very new, only about a year old. So we have really good contacts with them.
Okay, appreciate that. If you could send me a contact person for that particular committee, then we have liaisons with lots of different committees, Science CV,
Will do.
other things. Yeah.
Okay, will do.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Alice, did you want to jump in on research administration?
Oh, yes. I've been serving as the faculty liaison to the Research Administration Committee. And if you were on the call today, I was looking for suggestions about how to get more faculty who interact with those committees, with both the overarching committee and the various subcommittees that work within it. My sense is that faculty committee, that committee has focused on all things pre-award. And there's a very active working group right now that's looking at, is there a place where FDP could mount an effective demonstration on the pre-award side? And they're trying to identify what pieces of pre-award might be low-hanging fruit. And I think as faculty, you're the kind of input that they're looking for. Some of what they're talking about is to ask what kinds of things might go just in time and what kind of things need to stay part of the application itself that those of us who sit on review committees see. And so I think that's one group. Lynette, who was I just saw her head, but she disappeared on my screen, is the current administrative co-chair of that overarching committee. I would reach out to her or to me. One of the suggestions that several people on the meeting today talked about was it would be useful to have a one-pager about what it is that we faculty reps or faculty liaisons do on these committees. And I'll certainly start drafting something from my perspective, but it would be very useful to get input from those of you who are also serving as faculty liaisons. How can you describe your role in a way that would attract other faculty? And let's put something together and get it out to all the rest of you guys. George.
Okay. It occurs to me that I could report that the Communications Committee is working on, as part of the strategic plan, they're working on a communication strategic plan. And one of those things, well, one of the things that they're engaged in, Alice, is doing exactly what you're suggesting, is getting people to put together various modifications of brochures to recruit faculty, both as faculty reps, to have more faculty reps join the FDP and participate at a greater level. They've also engaged Vanguard Communication to develop a strategic plan that involves an improved website for FDP, as well as storytelling. They love that word, storytelling communications, where we get our message out to the rest of the federal government and our own home institutions as to what this organization does and what its value is. So there'll be a report to that effect, I'm sure, from Stephanie Scott on the committee report outs later in the meeting. But from the faculty perspective,
George, I heard a wonderful example of storytelling today in one of the sessions I went to. They were talking about troublesome federal clauses. And somebody in the chat asked, why should we care as faculty? And so I took the opportunity to ask, and she gave a great explanation of why we care about troublesome clauses. Because I think many of us, at least I've never had a grant that had troublesome clauses, but as she was rattling out, as she was explaining the kinds of things that all of our research offices see, I realized that I've heard colleagues who had these things and they had no idea what to do, or that the university could fight back. And that's where the faculty engaging on sort of with the administrative professionals, we learn what our universities can do to reduce burden. I'd also like to emphasize, I think it was Neil. I apologize, I'm not sure who it was. Yes, Neil, it was you, talking about what Jazz is going to be up to, because this question, along with Michelle and Laura from Michigan State, I've been working with the Federal Influence Working Group. And one of the suggestions that came out in the NPMR 33 report from OSTP, or Eric Lander, is the idea of digital persistent identifiers, things like ORCID for our publications and our employment information. But there's also the suggestion that there might be a clearinghouse somehow of our financial disclosures or conflict of interest disclosures. That's a huge issue. And what's that DPI going to look like? Is it protected from open records requests? Can they gather up what we've already reported to the institutions, or are we going to have to enter it all again. I'm sounding like Jerry. But so I think, Neil, that's an issue that you guys are going to be in the right place to talk about. Anyway.
David
I
Pollock
appreciate
has his
that.
hand up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I could jump in, nice boy, I raised my hand. So Alice, I serve on a very similar role here at UAB as faculty rep, just several research committees and things like this. And I think there's two major barriers. And if you could come up with a way to get faculty engagement, I would love to know, because we are evaluated, judged, everything else by high impact papers and how much grant money we're bringing in. There's no incentive for service whatsoever. And only those who feel compelled to really be energized about that or feel they get pleasure out of it or whatever, engaged. The other big problem that I have is we have absolutely no stake in any decision-making whatsoever. We advise the VP or the dean, give them our opinion, we walk away, the decision is made. So we don't have any power at all. So those two things, I think, are major disincentives. And I wish somebody had a way to solve it.
I think here. I think that's true, sadly, everywhere, right?
Right.
You guys are youngsters. I'm old enough to remember having to race. I was at Wayne State University in Detroit. The grants were administered in a building that was several city blocks and traffic blocks away from where my rats lived. And I had to race over there to move money from, I don't know, a personnel budget into a rat feed budget. And when the expanded authorities came along, that all of a sudden I had time to spend in the lab. I wasn't racing over anymore. That wasn't, is my understanding, that was one of the first FDP demonstrations, was that we weren't going to steal money if we moved it, if it wasn't all in tiny little buckets.
And I think where the FDP has some influences, outside opinions are far more valuable than inside opinions.
Yeah.
Over my career, I've always had that. When I used to be in the pharmaceutical industry, we'd bring experts in from the outside to tell us what we were right. And then the higher ups, the business people, would buy it.
That's a good point. I see Lynette has her hand raised.
I just wanted to say, in my humble opinion, faculty very much have power here at FDP. In fact, we frequently will try to meet with federal agency reps, and they want to meet with all of you. They want to hear from the faculty. So I think you very much have the power. And one of the groups that Alice was talking about within research administration, looking at the proposal development and submission business processes and what we can streamline, you all have a welcome open invitation to participate in that and see if we can together make a difference, because I think we really can. And there are a few people that are on that already on this call, Kelly and Sharon Dent, and I'm blanking on who else. So thank you, those that have volunteered. We'll take anyone else we can that's willing.
And again, if you're interested in participating in any of the things that we've talked about here this afternoon, you can send me an email. You can drop a note in the chat. We're going to have that recorded before the session ends, and we'll make sure you get connected in the right directions. Alice made mention of the Foreign Influence Working Group. And of course, tomorrow, on Thursday, there's going to be a session around the new OSTP memo. Many of us are involved in directly with the people who drafted that language. And yes, to remind you, there are any number of ways in which those recommendations may change the faculty experience. it would probably be worth an entire session just to talk about those, but there are discussions of new and standardized biosketches, which has of course been around for a really long time. There is mention of this unique identifier, which if it does come into play, it would most likely result in a demonstration around that. There is a group that's already looking at potentially demonstrating a key investor clearinghouse approach to providing information for your grant submissions that would follow you as a unique identifier to you, as opposed to being an institutional submission. There are potential changes to disclosures around your involvement as reviewers of proposals, as well as participating in panel review sessions for federal agencies and so forth. So it's a pretty sweeping set of recommendations around research security. It is also proposing or really mandating that there be offices of research security or programs of research security at our university, which I think, are keenly connected to the faculty experience, because of course the researchers are faculty, and that security issue is going to come down on, on the experiences that faculty have, and as well their management of their labs, their staffing, and so forth. So there's a lot going on in that. I encourage you to go to that session so that you can get a rundown. The Foreign Influence Working Group is working feverishly on dissecting that document so that we can give a first cut kind of assessment of the content that we all need to be aware of. And related to that, there is a key investigator clearinghouse project, better known as KIC, that is well on the way. One of the things that KIC has been doing is evaluating where there are already tools that can be leveraged, like your ORCID ID or your PubMed identifier. Some people have journals that do a really good job of disclosure as well. So we're investigating, or I should say assessing, all of the tools that may exist, whether they have open source coding, whether they can be expanded or broadened to reflect a larger participation by the investigators in the federal landscape, and how that might all work in association with the requirements that are coming down the road, the new disclosure requirements that are going to be upon us. So I encourage you to go to that session, and I would think that KIC will be in the very near future sharing a lot of the activities that they're involved in and doing this assessment and proposing kind of what kind of architecture that we think should be involved in an investigator identification that would be yours to control. And then hopefully the idea behind it is to eliminate all of the multiple disclosures that you have to do across, multiple agencies and your home institutions. So I don't see anyone else on this space who may have an update, but I want to open the floor in case there are any other updates that anyone wants to make. I don't know, David, do you want to say a word about FACT and the session coming up?
I can do that. This is Steve.
I'm sorry, I said David, I meant to say Steve, I apologize.
It's okay, I get that mistake all the time. So yeah, we've got, I don't want to give a full report because that is essentially what we are doing tomorrow. We have a FACT session tomorrow afternoon. You heard a nice bit about FACT a little bit ago at the beginning. What we will be really doing is kind of discussing the kinds of avenues we've been down, looking at these institutional variables at the FACT institutions in particular. And then at the end, what we are hoping to do, and inviting participation to do so, is have a brainstorming session about ways that we can use that information, build upon the approaches we've been taking at looking at institutions going forward, and fitting together with things like the workload surveys and reduction of burden at different institutions, particularly since there seems to be a lot of institutional variables that contribute to that. So tomorrow afternoon, I think it's 3 o'clock Eastern.
Thank you. And The other item on the agenda I want to point out is that we do have a faculty happy hour that happens tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. So I hope that some of you will make time to be there. It's usually just an opportunity to chat and catch up with everybody. So for those of you who can make it, we'll really look forward to seeing you. I think that brings us to the top of the hour. I really want to thank everyone for your participation and engagement. I especially want to thank Robert for his update on the evaluation activities that he's involved in. I hope you are having a wonderful FDP virtual experience. We are really looking forward to being back in person before we have one more virtual meeting in May, and then September, we're looking forward to seeing everybody in the flesh, so to speak. Enjoy, have a nice evening, and we will see you tomorrow.